Nematoda. Nematodes are commonly referred to as roundworms, threadworms, or pinworms. Nematodes is one of the largest groups of metazoan. Nematodes are pseudocoelomates, bilaterally symmetrical, cylindrical body with triploblastic nature. General characters of Nematoda. Some are parasites and others are free living in soil or water. Example, rhabditides. Body is long, cylindrical, without segmentation. Nematodes are characterized by a species-specific number of cells or nuclei. Body of nematodes is slender, cylindrical, unsegmented, with resistant cuticle. Body wall contains longitudinal muscles. Circular muscles are absent. Body cavity is pseudocoelom. Epidermis is syncytial. Locomotory cilia are absent. Some have ciliated gastrodermal cells. Alimentary canal is simple straight tube. Mouth at anterior end, anus at the posterior end. Digestion is both extracellular and intracellular. Intestine is non-muscular. Blood vascular system is absent. Pseudocoelomic fluid helps in the transport of nutrients. Excretory system contains H-shaped canals or excretory gland. Respiration is by anaerobic method. Nervous system consists of a circumenteric nerve ring with ganglia. Sense organs are amphids, mechanical, and receptors present at the anterior region of the body, and phasmids, glandulosensory structures in the posterior region of the body. Sexes are separate. Sexual dimorphism is present. Males are smaller with curved posterior end. They possess cloaca with one or two copulatory spicules. Females are longer with straight posterior end. Genital pole is separate from anus. Fertilization is internal. Development involves 4 moles of the cuticle. Nematodes exhibit cutling. It is a phenomenon in which cell division ceases near the end of embryonic development, so that number of cells of the adult is constant. Development includes rhabditiform larva.
Line of evolutionary history, and nematodes are just a little bit more advanced than the flatworms, the platyhelminthes, and then it branches off. On the left are echinodermata, those would be like the sea stars, and chordata. We are examples of chordata. And then off to the right, annelids are like earthworms and leeches. Then mollusks are going to be clams and squid, and then we have arthropods, which are all the insects and crustaceans. So you can see kind of where we're at as far as evolutionary developments. So for their body cavities, they are pseudocoelomates, so they have that false body cavity. That round layer is just one layer of mesoderm. They have a pharynx for feeding, and the pharynx is something that they can kind of protrude out of around their coelom. So like I said, they're not completely lined. It allows their organs to function without being interrupted by the surrounding tissue. And their pseudocoelom aids in circulation, digestion, and acts as a hydrostatic skeleton. So it gives them a little internal structure without having bones. They are the simplest animals to have a digestive system with 2 openings, a mouth and an anus. So this is the first major evolutionary change in organisms to have a one-way digestive tract. They breathe and excrete their waste through their body wall by diffusion, so they still use diffusion for that. And they have a simple nervous system consisting of several ganglia or groups of nerve cells in the head region, so they sort of have a rudimentary brain. And they also have several sense organs that are used to detect chemicals in their environment. For circulation, they can move fluids through their body cavity, through their pseudocoelom, and it helps with stating their different gases and for gas exchange. They have oxygen and carbon dioxide move in and out of this fluid through diffusion. And for movement, the rigid body offers resistance for their contracting muscles, and then they kind of have the wriggling motion from that. For excretion, they do depend on diffusion to get rid of their wastes. They use something called protonephridia for osmoregulation in freshwater, so they kind of function as kidneys, sort of, to help make sure that they have the right water balance in their bodies. They do go through a molting process. Some species have a thin, tough external cuticle, and in order to grow, they have to molt this outside layer. Here's some basic anatomy of any nematode. They have the mouth and pharynx, and this we're starting at the left side at the top. They do have a very rudimentary intestine. They do typically have separate sexes. So the top one is a female and the second worm is a male. So they'll have, they're not hermaphroditic. They have separate male and female sexes in these guys. So you can follow that through, and then they both do have an anus. You can see in the cross section where they have a dorsal nerve and a ventral nerve, and then they have their muscle layer is going to be the longitudinal. Reproduction, most nematodes are either male or female, like I said, not hermaphroditic. Fertilization takes place when the males use a special copulatory spine to open the female's reproductive tract and inject sperm into them. The sperm are unique in that they lack flagella and they move by pseudopods, like a big amoeba, so they kind of are little blob looking.
The thing you get most likely when you're a child, or most people. Pinworms are caused by the worm called Enterobius vermicularis. About tens of thousands of Australians particularly are thought to carry this worm asymptomatically. Essentially it comes from an egg. So here we have an egg. This is the infective form. Inside the egg contains larva. The egg itself is about 50 to 60 micrometers by 25 micrometers in width. Seed-like, colorless shape and is transparent. When the egg or the larva becomes a worm, the worm can be either female or male. A female worm makes more eggs. A male worm is a lot shorter than the female and helps the female in mating to produce more eggs. So let's see how Enterobius vermicularis causes an infection, causes pinworms in a human body. It's important to know that pinworms, Enterobius vermicularis, is thought to only target humans as hosts for reproduction. So here I'm drawing a human with the gastrointestinal tract because Enterobius vermicularis causes pinworms in humans starting from the digestive system. I'm also drawing a bum here because this is where the female worm will implant its eggs onto, causing a itch-like symptom on this human. So now let's begin and see how a pinworm infection is caused. The first thing that could happen is that contaminated food, water, with vermicularis eggs can be ingested by this human. A small number of eggs may also become airborne and inhaled. Because these eggs are so small, they can be inhaled and they can itself cause a pinworm infection. So these eggs are inhaled or ingested into this human, and the eggs goes down through the gastrointestinal tract to the small intestine. So following ingestion of the infected eggs, the larva will hatch in the small intestines. The larva will become either a male worm or a female worm. A male worm is about 5 millimeters long, female worm is about 10 millimeters long. So here you can see the infected eggs in the small intestines. Hatching, the larva will become worms. It can become a male worm or a female worm, as shown here. Now, the adult male and adult female can migrate to the colon, the large intestines, and then mate. The male dies after mating. Adult female begins moving to the rectum area about 1 month later. So here, the worms migrate to the colon, they can mate. The female survives. Now, the gravid female will migrate nocturnally outside the anus and ovipost, which basically means lay eggs, while crawling on the skin of the perianal area, meaning that the female worm will essentially go slowly out of the rectum and lay eggs in the bum area. The larva inside the eggs can mature 4 to 6 hours after the ovipose. So the larva within the eggs can actually mature 4 to 6 hours after the female implanted those eggs there. So retroinfection can occur where newly hatched larvae can actually move back inside the rectum and cause, again, making the bum still itchy. So obviously the symptoms would include itching around the anus, which is quite normal. And also by touching the anus and scratching it, you can cause contamination. And it's so easy to contaminate things with these eggs because they're so small. To diagnose pinworms, we can inspect the worms in the perianal area, the bum, basically 2 to 3 hours after the infected person is asleep, because you can see most likely the worm crawling out of the bum and laying eggs there 2 to 3 hours after a person is asleep. Or you could apply adhesive tape, which is normally done by doctors. Apply adhesive tape to the perianal skin when the person wakes up and before they have a shower. And we have to do this 3 consecutive days in 3 consecutive days. So we get the tape early in the morning, and it should have on it eggs and stuff. And then with this, we can visualize these eggs with an anal smear using a microscope. And if we can obviously see eggs, this person would be suffering from pinworms. Treatment of pinworms include mebendazole, pyrentyl palmate, I hope I pronounce this right, and albendazole. We give 1 dose initially, then a second dose 2 weeks later to prevent reinfection.
Was the first to observe this, and of course the ubiquitous Linnaeus applied the name, the moniker, Enterobius vermicularis, which has stayed to this day. It's actually an elegant looking worm. It's got all of the parts that Caenorhabditis elegans has. In fact, there's very little difference in this parasite as compared to the free-living adult of Caenorhabditis. But let's just discuss it in general again. It's tube-shaped and fusiform, so you see the head over here is blunted, but the tail is a sharp-ending little portion of its cuticle, hence the common name for it, pinworm. That's the part that they named this worm after, not knowing which end was which to begin with. Contains muscle, contains a cuticle which protects it from the elements of the outside world, namely our large intestine where this worm lives. The ovaries are shown here, and the production of eggs occurs there as well. And way up in the head end of this worm, and it's typical for all nematodes, we see the oral cavity, and then it leads to this bulbous muscular esophagus, and the parasite, well, if you want to call it a parasite, well, it's questionable as to whether this is a parasite or just a traveler in our gut tract. The food of this worm is the bacteria that comprises our fecal material. And it digests that material and converts it to metabolites, which it then reinstitutes into its ovaries to constitute eggs, and if it's a male,